Today on my Model A channel, I want to do something a little different. I want to take you on a tour through my library. Over the last century almost, there have been many books published about the Model A, and if you are just getting into the hobby, it can be hard to know which books are going to be helpful for you. And even if you've been in the hobby for a long time, if you don't have direct access to these books, it can be hard to know which books are going to be helpful for the next stage or for the particular goal that you have. And when you are looking to buy books, you're looking on eBay or you're looking at classifieds, you often don't get to see inside the books. So what I thought I would do in this video is take you on a tour of my particular Model A library, let you see inside my books, and tell you what I think is helpful about them. And that'll help you know whether these are books that you want to add to your library. So I thought we would go in order from most useful to least useful. And that way you can turn off the video when you feel like you've seen enough. So anybody want to guess which book is going to be the most useful, number one most useful Model A book in my library? You might be surprised. The number one most useful book in the Model A library, I think, is the Restoration Guidelines and Judging Standards. This is also known as the RG and JS, or just the JS if people are referring to it on the web. So this is it's a big book. It's in a nice big fat blue binder. You can get it from either the Mark or from MAFCA. They publish it jointly, and it's updated every few years. I think this was last updated in 2016, but they're going to come out with a new version hopefully next year. And the way this is organized is it's designed for the use of people who are judging fine point competitions. So in other words, if someone is trying to create a car that looks exactly like it did when it came out of the factory, off the assembly line, this book will tell you exactly how that car would have appeared. And then it gives you it tells you how to where to deduct points if something doesn't look the way it was supposed to. And you may think, well, how's that useful to me as a Model A owner? And I'm going to show you. But just showing you how this book is organized. So it's organized in all these different areas: engine compartment, electrical, cooling, undercarriage, etc. So there's all these different areas of the car. And then there are different supplements. So there's a supplement for early 1928 vehicles, convertible sedans, station wagons, mail trucks, commercial vehicles, Canadians, not Canadian people, Canadian Model A's, and cabriolets. The first reason I think this is the most useful book to own is that it answers so many questions that I see come up all the time. So here's an example. What color is the correct color for the engine? It says right here, the color of Ford engine green was neither bright nor dark. It varied in shade from engine to engine. So that tells you right there. People are always asking, was there a single correct shade? No. Another reason this is an extremely useful book is you've got a lot of just basic information in here. So here you've got the typical wiring diagram from 1929 onward. So that's included in this book. Another reason this is helpful to have is a lot of the cars that you're encountering, especially if this is your first car, you may encounter you are probably encountering a lot of parts that you don't know if they are reproduction parts or original parts. And if they're original parts, you don't know if they're original to the car or if they're kind of Frankenstein together from lots of different cars. One of the things the judging standards are going to let you do is to date all the different parts that you're going to find on your car. So here's an example. Did you know that there are markings on the starter cover bands that will allow you to try to figure out when that cover band was produced? It's got a date code on it. Again, here, so battery cable routing change. So in November 29, the way the battery cable was routed was changed from one way to another way. And this does two things. First of all, it can help you see something about when your car might have been produced, but this also gives you kind of maintenance information about your car, right? So you can say, oh, well, in my car, the battery cable's routed this way, but it looks like they decided that was bad and they want to route it around this way. So I should change it. How do I move this grommet? So there's maintenance information in here as well. Another thing, this is super important, like here, so there's the battery cable is supposed to go through this grommet, right? And you can see battery to switch cable support changes. So it's got a grommet here, it's got a bracket, it shows you these different brackets. Probably half the cars on the road, I don't know, I made that number up, but a bunch of cars on the road, this bracket like doesn't even exist, right? Somebody took this out and the battery cable is just snaking randomly through the floorboards. Without the judging standards, you're not even going to know this bracket's supposed to be there. So a huge thing that is helpful about having the judging standards is it tells you what is supposed to be on the car. When you get your car for the first time, a huge problem that people have is they don't know what's supposed to be on the car and what's not supposed to be on the car. I see this all the time. Guy posts a picture of his engine bay, and an experienced eye can pick out 6 things in that engine bay that aren't supposed to be there, and he doesn't know. And with the judging standards, it'll tell you. You get all sorts of interesting things. Here are all the different kinds of distributors that they had. Here are all the different changes in the ignition cable clips, right? So I saw this happen. A guy was like, okay, so here's another thing. You end up with stuff at swap meets, right? Or you get something at an estate sale, and you're like, what is this? I don't recognize this, right? I saw this on a forum. A guy was like, I've got an ignition cable and it doesn't have the stamped steel. That's the one I recognize. It has this weird cast clip. Does anybody recognize this? And you could go to your judging standards. You can say, oh, well, this cast clip was used from mid-1928 through mid-1929. Then you recognize it. So that's another thing is, here again, like the slant pull coils. This is a perfect example. People are always like, is this an original coil? Is this an original coil? Here's what the original coils looked like. There were 3 versions of the original coils. Here's exactly what they look like. If you don't have a coil that looks like one of these 3, it's not an original coil. It's very straightforward. One of the things that's super helpful about having the judging standards is you can tell immediately what's original equipment and what's not. And you can also tell what kind of original equipment it was. Is it correct? What year is it correct for? And it's very helpful if you have parts that you want to sell, right? So you've got extra stuff, or you've inherited stuff, or you've just got stuff lying around. You want to sell it. You maybe don't know exactly what it is. The judging standards are going to be super helpful for helping you figure out exactly what kind of stuff you need. Here's another example of how these are useful. The springs. Okay, the undercarriage, right. So here are different radius rods. So the radius rods are different in different years. You could, if you're out there buying a radius rod, you need to know whether you're looking for a 28-29 radius rod or a 30-31 radius rod. If you have the judging standards, you're going to know what to look for. Here's the springs. If you are looking for a front spring or a rear spring, the rear springs specifically, 9 times out of 10, if you're like coming across a rear spring, probably it's, I don't know, most of the rear springs I come across, they're the 10 spring rear springs. Well, if you don't know, right, if you haven't like delved into rear springs, so the 10 leaf rear springs, right, so that's the A, D, and E springs. Those are used for the 2 doors, 4 doors, town cars, town sedans, etc., all these different ones. Notably, they're not used on the Phaetons, the coupes, the sport coupes, cabriolets, the Vickies, and the Roadsters. Those have 8-leaf and 7-leaf springs. So if you have a coupe or Roadster, and you're like, I need a new leaf spring, and you go out and you buy a 10-leaf rear spring, you have bought the wrong spring. And if you haven't already taken it apart, you might not know that, right? But this is going to tell you. So there's all this stuff that is included, and that's gonna help you know exactly what you need to buy. If you're selling, it's going to tell you exactly what you're selling. Here, I'll show you. There's another. Let's see. So in the early 1928s, yeah. So look, this is something I'm dealing with right now. So in the early 1928s, there were these different U-joint housing caps, right? So here's a U-joint housing cap that I got at an estate sale. I'm like, what type is this, right? These are pretty similar, but using this, I can look at the underside. So this one has the lug on the lower half. This one doesn't. This one doesn't have the lug. So therefore, this is this third type U-joint housing cap beginning January 1928. Okay, so now when I go to post this for sale, I know exactly what type of U-joint housing cap I have. I can put that in the description. Anybody who buys it is going to know exactly what they're getting, even if they are not super familiar with all the different types. So this makes you a better buyer. It makes you a better seller. It makes you a better owner. This book is usually $55, I think, from either of the clubs if you're buying a new one. I think Mark usually runs a Black Friday sale where you can get it for $20. Comes shrink wrapped, and I think it's like the binder is empty and you buy the different you get each set of pages and you have to kind of self-assemble it. And what's nice is if you buy it, if you just buy it once, then when they come out with updates, you can see this one says revised 2011. Revised 2011. Okay, and then this page says revised 2016. So when they come out with one that's going to be like revised 2026 or whatever, what you'll get is a packet of pages, and it'll be like only the pages that have changed, and you just go through your binder and you update just the pages that have changed, and then you didn't have to buy a whole new book, and now you have an updated judging standard. So for my money, this book is the single most useful book to have throughout your Model A ownership. This is the one that I pull out the most often. The second most useful book in my library is the book that probably all you guys thought was going to be the first most useful book, which is the Red Book, the Les Andrews Model A Ford Mechanics Handbook. This is also a book I think no Model A library should be without, in addition to the judging standards. I think they're both mandatory. So the Model A Ford Mechanics Handbook by Les Andrews, published in, I want to say 2002. So starting to show its age, I think. But it's broken down alphabetically, more or less. You've got a service and repair section that is all the major parts of the car, alphabetically, and then within each of those, you've usually got it's kind of broken down into taking it out, inspecting it, and then repairing it and putting it back together. And so for each of the major sections of the car, you've got that. And he's also got these kind of, he's got these little, what are the capacities? So he goes through, he has all this stuff that you're gonna do. You're gonna do all of these, the gas gauge, the motor mounts, the kingpins, the speedo, the steering assembly, the 2-tooth and 7-tooth. He's got different sections. The throwout bearing, the timing gear, the water pump, all that stuff. Now he has a section on the engine. I think if you are going to do an engine, this is a good place to start. I don't know that I would want to rely entirely on the Red Book if I were going to do an engine overhaul. I'd want to read a little bit more about every step that I was doing, unless I was just doing something very straightforward, like I'm just going to break this engine down, clean it all up, and put it back together. If you really are, if you're trying to build an engine that is in any way, optimized for performance, or you're going to mix and match parts from different engines to achieve some end, I would not rely just on this. It's a little bit surface level. And it also is, like all of these books, it's the author's opinion. And we'll talk about that a little more when we get to one of these other books. But, this is the way Les Andrews would do this, right? And he presents it as, this is how you do X. But you have to interpret that as like, this is how I would do X. And there's more than one way to do X. This is how I would do it. Anyway, so bearing that in mind, there are, so one of the things that you'll see here is there are errors in the book. So this is a section on the brakes, and you can see here, I've gone through and it looks like he wrote here 9/16, and these are actually 11/16 sockets. So if you go various places on the internet, you'll see lists of the errors that he made in the book, and these have never been corrected. This was published in 2002. He's never put out a corrected he's never put out a corrected version. We keep coming across errors that he made. So I've got all these little places where I've made corrections. And you can also see, your copy's going to look like this too. I've just got all kinds of oil stains on it because, I've had this laying up on top of the car while I was working on it. But it is very well illustrated. It's got this nice open spiral binding, so you can kind of fold it flat with whatever page you want. He's got all these little notes. He tells you what size you need. He tells you how many of something there are. He has these great little illustrations. He tells you what the names of things are. It's really great. I don't want to overstate my my criticism of it. For all of its faults, it's indispensable as a starting, as sort of your first point of reference. If you're like, I've never done X before, how do I do X? This is absolutely the first place that you come. He's got all these exploded assembly drawings. It's really helpful. I will, but I will just say, the more technical, here's another one, what is I would say particularly the torque values. If there's a torque value in here and that you're at all really, that's the torque value, I would definitely get a second opinion. His torque values are not always correct. But I mean, other than that, it definitely, it's great. So he's got, here's the rear springs. Here's how to get them out. He shows you, if your rear spring disassembly, here's where to put your C-clamps when you're taking the rear spring out. So, here's how to do the starter motor. This is a really helpful book. And when you are getting started and you're afraid to touch anything on the car, this is a super helpful book that will get you working. And it also has these kind of basic troubleshooting charts. So here's a kind of basic troubleshooting for the ignition system, basic troubleshooting for the electrical system, and he goes through and kind of explains how the charging circuit works. Here's some kind of basic information about if you've got a certain kinds of knock, checklist, different cotter pins. Here's a spec card. Again, just random mistakes. The differential does not take 2 1/4 pints. It takes 1 1/2 pints. So, here's a, reference for how do you match the numbers on the body types to the names. Very useful stuff. I would absolutely recommend this as the second most useful book to have in a Model A library. The third most useful book to have in your Model A library, and this I think might be another surprise, sort of. It is not really a book per se. It is your personal binder. So I think every Model A owner needs a binder. You know, I bought this at Walmart. You've got to have a binder for the stuff that you're going to accumulate over the life of owning the car. So this is just my binder, and I've got a couple of different tabs in here. So I don't know if you can read them, but I've got my first tab here is manuals or installation guides. And then I've got another tab, which is receipts and records. And this is just, you know, you get stuff like, you get stuff that comes with stuff that you buy. You have guides that you print out. Like here's that guide to how to do leakless oil pan gaskets, right? This thing gets passed around, and I printed it out, and now I have a place to put it, right? You put a 3-hole punch, and now you've got a place to put it. It's so much better than just putting it in a stack on your desk. This is a set of laminated, I can't remember where I got these. It's a set of laminated assembly diagrams, and they're beautiful. Look at these. I can't remember where I got these, but look, now I have somewhere to put them. Drag link assembly, transmission, how the transmission goes together, 2-2 steering gear, 7-2 steering gear, oil pump assembly, speedo drive, rear end assembly, water pump, Zenith distributor, generator pulley, different types of generator pulleys. I don't know why I have this. There's that same diagram again. This is really nice. Look at this. It's an engine wiring diagram it's not like a schematic. It actually has pictures of all the different. I find this really helpful. It's always nice when it's like the pictures of the actual things that are connected. Yeah. And then also, I've just got receipts, right? You need some place to put all the receipts for all the places all the things that you bought. You know, you're going to need this stuff. And then I also have like documentation, cars that I bought. And then this is the provenance from where the stuff that came with the car. So this is all the stuff from before I owned the car. You need this book. So the third most useful book is, it's not necessarily the stuff that's in the book, it's the fact that you have the book. Like, you have to get a binder like this so that you have a place for these things to go. Otherwise, you're gonna lose them. You're gonna, you know, they'll be scattered around your garage, or you won't print them out in the first place. So that's my recommendation. Is third most useful book is get a binder just so you have a place for things to go. Okay, so those are the top 3. At this point, I kind of want to drop the rankings thing. I don't think it's that important. But what we're going to do now is we're going to kind of get into progressively deeper levels of either repair or restoration or historical interest. Whichever rabbit hole you're going down, we're going to go progressively deeper into that rabbit hole. So going a little bit deeper into the rabbit hole of troubleshooting, we're going to look at the Blue Book. This is the Les Andrews Volume 2, Troubleshooting and Diagnostics. I think this is a really useful book to have that I, and I think a lot of people don't consult as often as we should. This book is an extremely systematic way of doing any kind of troubleshooting. And, you know, just knowing that this book exists, when you go on a lot of internet forums and you see somebody will post like, I'm having problem X, and then you look at all of the posts in response to problem X, and you're like, these guys are just making stuff up. When you know that you could go instead look at this book. And this book is going to walk you step by step through exactly what you would do. So you've got, let's go here. You've got, you know, diagnosing the cranking system, diagnosing ignition and timing circuit, diagnosing fuel system, diagnosing engine performance, clutch, transmission, differential, front end, brake system, symptoms, causes, and fixes, right? And it takes you through every single thing. Engine won't start. Engine backfires through the carb. I can't tell you how many times that comes up. Here's what you do. So let's follow this. Like, okay, engine backfires through the carburetor, page 316. Right? So here you are. Here you are. You're like, oh no, my engine is backfiring through my carburetor. Okay. And he's like, here you go. Here are 9 possible things that could be happening if your engine is backfiring through your carburetor. And note that he has listed them in the order in which it's probably, sort of like most common to least common. So the most common is vacuum leak in the intake manifold, right? So he's like, okay, check for a vacuum leak. Check to make sure see if your float level is set too high. Check to see if your valve timing is wrong. Check to see if your ignition timing is wrong. Check to see if your ignition valves are seating properly. Pre-ignition. Blown head gasket. Shorted distributor body, right? So he's like, all these things could be wrong. Now, some of these, shorted distributor body those are actually easier to check for than blown head gasket, moisture in distributor body. But all these things are things that could possibly happen. Probably 7 times out of 10, it's you got an intake manifold leak. But that's exactly the kind of thing he talks you through. He's like, okay, you've got this problem. It could be one of these 8 things. Here's what you do. He's also got, for the transmission, it's noisy and neutral. Here are things you can do. And then it's also got one of the things that's cool is if you really want to do some deep dives, he's got these system descriptions. So, this is when if you really want to sound knowledgeable at the club or on the internet, you can read these, and this will explain like exactly how the entire system works. He's got these diagrams. Like, here is how the primary circuit works. Here's how everything works in the battery, the electrical system. Here's how the starter switch works. Here's how the starter motor drive works. All these things. So it tells you exactly how everything works. And this is really useful for understanding, like, if you've got developing that kind of systems thinking of, okay, if I'm hearing this or if I'm seeing this, it's probably something in this system because I know how these systems work together. Steering and front end, brake system description, service brake adjustment, flywheel housing variation measurement. It's got all this stuff. Yeah, how to make a test light, how to make a float gauge. You're going to need a feeler gauge. You're going to need a vacuum gauge. You're going to need a mic. Yeah, you're going to need an engine stethoscope. Walks you through everything you're going to need to do this kind of like more sophisticated diagnosis than you are gonna get from just the Red Book. So that's why you would want a book like this. The Red Book is just telling you, okay, once you know the problem, here's how you take apart or replace the thing. But a lot of people, if you only have the Red Book, that doesn't help you in actually figuring out where the problem is. This is a book that you need if you are trying to figure out, like, I've got random thing going wrong, right? Like fuel system. How do I tell if the problem is between the fuel system or the electrical system? This is the book that's going to help you figure that out. Front end wanders from side to side. Low speed shimmy. Transmission noisy in second gear only, right? All these, it's very detailed. High pitched squeal when clutch depressed. All this stuff, every single one of these is things that I've seen people come on the Facebook groups in Ford Barn and say, help, I've got this problem. And if you had this book, you would be able to solve that problem for yourself. So this is a very helpful book to have. Now this is a book that I think a lot of people have not seen. So this is the Complete Model A Ford Restoration Manual by Les Pearson, not to be confused with Les Andrews. There's a different Les. I think he's from New Zealand. And it's a very expensive, it's like 80, I think it's $80. And it's one reason a lot of people don't have it. But it is kind of a companion to the Red Book. So this book has you can see why it's expensive. Every page, color photographs, like high resolution color photographs, which is so helpful if this is something that you are trying to do. But you can see it covers a lot of the same material as the Red Book, but it does so with a focus on restoration. So this is specifically geared toward someone who is trying to take original parts and repair them and get them back in working order. But it goes through all the different parts, and also because he's from New Zealand, he takes great pains to address both the left-hand drive and the right-hand drive versions of things. So it's very, very extensive. Here's the radiator. You know, he goes through, these are all the engine bay parts. Here's the brakes. Here's the bearings. Now we're into the rear end. He talks about the different gear ratios, how many teeth on the different rings. Yeah, he shows the kind of vertical mount that you're going to need if you're going to do a rear end repair. And again, like, this is a lot of text. So one of the things that, you know, I talked about with Les Andrews is, you know, he's like, here's the way you do X. And I said, you have to interpret this as being, well, here's how I would do X. With Les Pearson, he's a lot more front and center with that. So you see, like, you know, he's got, like, here's where 10-threaded studs come in handy if you're installing multiple gaskets. Do not use a silicone type gasket sealer. I recommend Indian head shellac gasket sealer, right? So you'll see this all over the book. It's very much, he's like, here's how I would do it. Here's my particular opinion about what's the best way to do it. He's very upfront with, this is his way of doing it. But again, you can see, like, very, very detailed, right? Takes this color photograph, breaks it down, all of these insets, describes exactly what you're going to need, extremely detailed. You know, here's all the part numbers. Now is the time to run a tap through all the threaded holes in your gearbox case. Here are all the different tap sizes that you would use. Yeah. Extremely detailed. Most pumps will require everything replaced apart from the body casting. You will require, as new, the following, and he lists all of them. I like the kind of DIY thing here. I don't know why he's got, like, pound signs here. You can tell this just came directly out of his computer. Yeah, and you can tell he's got, like, you know, here's his take on the V8 distributor plates. You know, this is just what he thinks about it. And here's his, the powerhouse generator. Here's his take on, you know, now we're into the engine, brake rods. And I mean, and we also get into, like, a lot of the body stuff. Now, this is stuff you really do not get in the Red Book. Oh yeah, like, here's his, like, here's just a random anecdote about the shocks. Yeah, here's how to do the pickup bed, right? And it's like complete pictorial on rebuilding the pickup bed. Here's how to position the body blocks. Here's how to do the fuel tank. Here's a section, how to check a wheel for defects. So he goes through all these different defects to look for, and then can you repair this or not? Yeah, so here's something I love. He's got all these little details. The door latch mechanism. You know, he's got this whole paragraph where he says, by doing this and replacing the return spring, it will ensure you do not have droopy door handles. Nothing looks worse than to see a good restoration with droopy door handles. Isn't that the truth? He's also got, it's so helpful to have, I have a Phaeton. I got this in particular because he has these great pictorials where he's like, okay, here's what the body sockets need to look like, right? If you're putting your side curtains on, here's exactly what they need to look like. Here's original 1930 Phaeton side curtain samples. I have a 1930 Phaeton, right? Here are exactly what the side curtains look like. Yeah, if you are restoring a car and you do not have a top and you don't even know, like, what you are supposed to be looking for, this is a really great book to have because he has exact pictures. He's like, here, 1930 Phaeton top irons. Here's exactly what they look like. Here's what they'll look like without the top fabric. Here's what they look like installed on the car. Here's how they attach. Here's how you attach them. Here's the stud. Here's how it goes. It's very helpful. It's extremely detailed. So if you're doing, this like body restoration work, this is really useful. Phaeton top saddle. This is extremely useful for these little details that you're not going to find in any other book. And that's why I got it. If you really need these details and you don't have somebody around you who's got an example that you can look at, this book is going to be very helpful. All right, next up is the service bulletins. Notice I've got 2 books. So these are the Model A service bulletins. This is just one of the many different editions, reprint editions that you can get. And then these are the 1932 service bulletins. And there's actually, both of these are available digitally, which is my personal preferred way to look at them, because they're searchable. But you can get these in paper form too. I think you can get away without having a copy of the service bulletins, but it's very helpful. You never know when you're going to need them. So for example, here, for example, is the description, if you have the 2829 coupe, of how to add more space in the seat. I've actually done this in my 29 coupe, and I just used these instructions. Like, I just referred to this page. It says cut off 1 5/8 inch from the package tray cover. I did that. It says reverse the brackets. I did that. You just follow these instructions and you add legroom. So it's very helpful for having that kind of thing. It tells you exactly here, like exactly what the lengths of the brake rods are supposed to be. All that kind of little details you'll find in here. And a lot of this stuff is covered elsewhere. So just an example, this is right here is probably a diagram that you may have seen before. It's this diagram that shows the difference between the A distributor cam and the B distributor cam. You can't really buy, as far as I know, you can't buy a Model A distributor cam new. If you buy a new distributor cam, you're going to get the B cam. And this diagram tells you what's different about them. Then on the next page, it shows you these distributor bodies that they were supplying after 1931. They were, the distributor bodies had this lower gap, and you were supposed to cut out the gap to make room for the A upper plate. So if you're at a swap meet and you're seeing distributor bodies and they have, bigger or smaller gaps, the service bulletin can explain why that's going on. So anyway, I would say having a copy of the Model A service bulletins I think that should be pretty high on your list for your library. But again, if it were me, I would get the digital version. You can get it on a DVD and load it up on your computer. It is a searchable PDF. It's very high resolution. You can zoom way in on these diagrams. You could print out any page you particularly want to refer to. I find the digital version much more useful, but you may have a different relation with it. You can find these. There are I don't know that I would say original, but there are vintage copies that are in a larger format. They tend to go for a lot more. I think $40 or $50 is how much those cost. But those may be easier to reference than this. This is like a cheap reprint, with smaller lettering than I think it originally was. Another really helpful book in your library, although it has not so far been helpful to me, is the Model A Ford Paint and Finish Guide. So this is, again, published by the clubs. And this is fundamentally for, judging. They're trying to get you to be correct on your paint colors. So this is sort of an adjunct to the judging standards. You won't, I don't think you'll find this. You may find this particular page in the judging standards, but what it goes on to do is it has, it's very specific to exactly how paint was applied. and exactly how everything, all the paint looked. You know, it goes into like, was this matte or satin or gloss? Like, exactly what kind of paint was it? And then it has these paint chips, which, now this is the 1991 version, and I gather that there may have been some changes since then. I'm not sure, and I know that I think they now, like, it's printed rather than being actual paint chips. This is like I can touch this with my finger. It's actually pasted on there. So they've got these other paint chips there. But this is a very helpful thing if you're trying to get an accurate paint. You can see one of the things this has is the paint charts. So it'll show you, like, for a given, you know, for my, let's say I've got a 1930 Phaeton, right? So it shows you in a given year what body and belt molding and pinstripe and wheel colors were available. So if it's important to you that your car look the way that a car of the era would have looked with a particular paint combination, this is going to help you do it. So you would start from one of these body colors, and then given the body color, you would then say, okay, well, based on that body color, the belt molding would have been X, the pinstripe would have been Y, the wheels would have been Z. I guess the wheels would have been Y too, because the pinstripe and the wheels always match. So that's another thing, you know, even if you decide to go with your own colors, it's useful to know that, for example, Ford had this design policy that the pinstripe and the wheels would always match on these cars, right? So that's a helpful thing to know. So this is not something that I have personally used because I haven't repainted any of my cars. But if you are going to do paint, and if authenticity is a concern of yours, this is absolutely a book that I would recommend having in your library. It goes into considerable detail about how things were done, and having the paint chips is going to be very helpful to you if you're trying to get your local paint shop to match a particular color. The next set of books I want to talk about is the body parts list, the parts price list, and automotive hardware and trimming supplies. This is sort of like a set of 3. It's not really a set, and you'll see a lot of people who have just the parts price list. But in my mind, they all kind of go together, because the purpose of these 3 is to really help you isolate exactly what is the part, a particular part that you need or that you have or you think you're missing. What is the number of that part? What parts go together in an assembly? It's really for this kind of very pedantic, exacting, trying to do something exactly correctly. And it's also useful if you're doing a little bit of historical detective work. I'll kind of show you that as we go. But so this is the body parts list is going to cover just stuff that is literally part of the body. So, you know, that's like the different body styles. So this one is from, these are all reprints, but this one is the one from 1930. And so this is just going to cover the models that they had in 1930. So you notice this shows like the 35B, doesn't show 35A. So this isn't going to cover any of the 28, 29 body types. But within these body types, if you, we'll have to sort of flip to the end first, but so it basically lays out each of the different body types that was offered in 1930. And it has all these guides, you know, these little arrows showing the different parts of the body, these different assemblies that went together to make the body, in case you need to identify a particular assembly that you're looking for. But then once you know that, or if you know the exact one that you're looking for, you can drill down. So for example, let's say that I had a Phaeton, a 1930 Phaeton, so that'd be 35B, and I had a top, and the top irons were incomplete, let's say, and I knew I needed a particular fastener or a particular rib or something like that. This list would allow me to identify the exact part that I needed, right? So where I am is I'm in top open cars, and for each of these I've got, it shows me exactly which ones are used on which car. So I'm going to drill down to the section I need, then I'm going to look for the car body style that I've got or that I'm interested in, and then, you know, using, if necessary, the description of like what the name of the assembly is that I'm looking for, I'm going to find the part that I'm interested in, and then I can use that. Using that, I can find the part number, right? So once I've got the part number, then that number becomes my cross-reference for whatever else I need to do. So I can look up that part with a vendor. I can look up that part on eBay. I can go send an email to the Benson library, and I can get the drawing for that part and figure out exactly what the dimensions are. There's lots that I can do. So that is what the body parts list is useful for. But again, it is just for parts on that particular body style. So if you're going to get the body parts list, you need to make sure that you're getting it. You're getting a document, that you're getting a book that's going to cover the body that you've got. The parts price list, which I think is probably the most common of these three books that you're going to find. This covers engine, chassis, suspension, and instrument, dash, firewall, parts, transmission, all that stuff, all the stuff that's like standard to every car, or almost every car. And you can see this one, this is a reprint, but it covers the V8 and the Model A and the Model B. So it's sort of it's a big book. It is useful in that it has pictures. They're not, great, but it has different boxes. So you can see here, here's the Model A parts, here's the Model B parts, and here's the V8 parts, and kind of breaks it down. So, here's here's water pump stuff. And so, here again is, this is like gasoline related. And you can do some interesting things here. And again, if what you're interested in is tracing down a particular part, one of the things that's useful is a lot of this stuff is grouped by assemblies. I don't know if I can find, here's a good one, generator support. So it's B10151, but then it breaks that down. And you can see generator support, B10151 was A10151-C, used 1939 to 1932, and then it breaks this down into some very specific parts. It gives you the different screws. This was used 28 to 29, but then these were used for all the years plus into the Model B. So that can be really helpful if you are trying to chase down exactly what the thing is that you need. Going back to the gasoline, there's other ways that this is useful. So for example, you can see here are two of the different inside fuel lines. So there's A9230AR. There's that AR designation. This is actually where the AR designation got started, if you've heard that. Ford used this for obsoleted parts. And then A9230B. So if I go and find, in this list, they're alphabetical by the number. So I have to go to the next page. Okay, here we go. 9230 AR and B. So here's pipe, cowl tank to sediment bulb assembly, 28 to 29, and then the next one is 30 to 31. And you can see they're shaped differently. So this can help you if you are, if you have found one of these at a swap meet or something, and you're trying to remember like which one is correct for my year, or whatever. So you got this visual reference. The 28 to 29 one is a little bit curvy. The 30-31 one is just a right angle like that. So that's something that the parts price list is helpful for. Another thing it's helpful for is just knowing kind of these very fine details of the different words for things. So note here, A9155, this is the cast iron sediment bulb. And so you can see here, 9155, sediment bulb assembly, used 28 to 31. And then here, 9161, bowl gasoline filter. So that is the glass bowl, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with, and which is, you know, at this point, I think probably much more common than the cast iron bulb. So you've got the bulb and the bowl. And I think those terms are used, are not really used properly by a lot of people anymore, but this will help you kind of know which terms go with what. And you'll also see here, you know, here's the bulb assembly, and then there's the nut, the washer, here's a washer that goes with the bowl, and here's all the different pieces that goes with each of these, and there's some of the pictures. So this is helpful just in terms of knowing which parts you need if you're trying to chase down. Make sure you've got all the parts that go with a particular assembly. And then automotive hardware and trimming supplies. You can see this is, again, has a lot of useful pictures, although these are not, you know, these kind of look like bad photocopies, and they probably are. But this has a lot of just the real little things, the little details that can be really hard to get right. So you can see I have a Phaeton, a 1930 Phaeton, and so I've just gone through and highlighted here 35B. Any place that the word 35B appears, I went through and highlighted it because I knew that was a part that I might need. So you got all these different door bumpers, escutcheons, springs, fasteners, all the different door handles, right? Like, I mean, you come across a door handle, right? You're at a swap meet, you come across a door handle. Does this door handle fit my car? I don't remember. I can't bring the car with me, but I could bring this book with me to a swap meet, and I could quickly look up whether this is a door handle that goes on, you know, does it go on my car? Does it go on my trunk? This is a very useful reference to have. It can also just help you know what you're looking for. I mean, a lot of these look very similar, right? Like this is the outside handle for the 35B. Looks real similar to a lot of these if you're just getting into this and you don't exactly know what you're looking for. You know, again, here's the inside handle for the 35B. Like this is the exact one that I'm looking for. It looks very similar to a lot of the others. So this is a great reference to have if you are hunting swap meets for exactly the right part that you need for your car. And then we've also got these great diagrams of different kind of fasteners, like, you know, what is this, like this washer? So again, you're cross-referencing stuff, right? So here are all these different, you know, all these different fasteners. I mean, I'm just picking stuff at random, but you see how you've got these horn brackets. Notice that the big parts start with A or B and then a number, but then these little fasteners, they just have a number, and then they have a letter afterward, that describes what kind of finish it has. Well, this is not very useful, but then if you can come over here to this book and you can cross-reference this number against this book, now you can find the number, and now, look, it tells you what it is. And now you can look for this particular thing, and you kind of got a picture of it. So that's why I say that these three books are useful to have all together. They play off of each other. You know, it's like a Venn diagram. They have overlapping areas that they're helpful for. No one book is going to cover everything, but if you have all of them, then you are much better situated to conclusively identify, okay, I'm missing this part. What is the exact nature of the part I need? What does it look like? What are its measurements? What is its part number? Where else could I find it? All that kind of stuff. So these are very helpful if you're trying to run down, you know, like a single missing part that you don't exactly know what you're looking for. The next thing I'm going to talk about is books that are useful if you are restoring a very particular part or a real specific niche. So the first thing I'll cover is carburetors. I myself am not really into carburetors, but I happen to have a couple of books. This is sort of a good basic book. If you're going to have like one book on carburetors and you are not planning to get into carburetor restoration as a specialty or a thing that you're working on, this is a good start. This book is readily available. I think you can buy this from the club libraries, and this is going to cover the two main varieties. You've got the Zenith and the Tillotson, and this is Paul Moller's book. He just covers kind of general, how they work, the differences between the different varieties, right? He's like, here's he goes through the first Zenith 1, later Zenith 1, first Zenith 2, later Zenith 2, here's Zenith 3, single Venturi, double Venturi, what it means, how they work, and he's got how to get them apart, like tips and tricks for getting them apart, how to repair them, labels for all the different parts, how to float test them, all this stuff. It's kind of I'm not going to say it's the be all and end all, sort of a basic just overview of simple carb repairs that'll probably take care of, I don't know, 50 to 75% of the carbs you're gonna find. And then he's got some, if it's not working, here's some things you can try. And then that's the Zenith part, and then he has a Tillotson part, how to do the Tillotsons, again, same kind of thing. So if you're just going to have one book on carburetors, you should have this book, and that's actually why I have it. If you want to move up from here, if you want to get really into Zeniths particularly, there's the Pagé book, which I've heard good things about. You can get from the clubs. That goes into restoring the Zenith carburetor in great detail. And then another book that you can also check out if you can find it is called Restoring Model A Carburetors the Reheis Way, although confusingly it's not written by Reheis, it's written by Gordon Biggar. And that one is probably the most recently written, and it draws from all of the other books. It draws from the Moller book, it draws from the Pagé book, and then it goes into some detail on, in addition to the Model A Zeniths, it also talks about the Model B Zenith. So if you want to get into Model B Zenith restoration, you are definitely going to need the Biggar book. However, that book is out of print and much more difficult to find than the other two. So here is a book, Restoring the Open A's by Mack Hils. I think he also did a book on pickups, which I don't have. This is a much older book. This is from 1984, and this is essentially just a photo album. So it is a combination of photos that he took or had access to of unrestored original cars. They're all black and white, or mostly black and white, or from the 80s. And then he also had there are also some publicity photos. Yeah, you can see these are original Ford publicity photos of the cars. And these can be useful. I got this because for my Phaeton, I wanted some reference points for exactly what things look like. And so, this can be helpful if you need to know, you're like, okay, exactly what is this thing supposed to look like? But it has some issues. It was published during the 80s. And so on the restored cars, some of the details are incorrect. It's just a pictorial. It doesn't really have any text that explains what's going on. And everything's in black and white, so the detail is not as fine. I think there are probably better ways to do this if you were going to do this for the first time. I mean, some of this is, so yeah, here's, yeah, like this is a 1930 Phaeton. This is a contemporary photograph. This was taken, you know, in 1930, and you can clearly see, you know, in some ways this like raises more questions than it answers. Like one of the things that, you know, you can see here, there's this rubber plug where when the top lays down, there's like a post that comes out here and a saddle that the top sits on. And in this photo, the saddle is not there. There's just this rubber plug there, right? So like, why, right? Why does this one have it? I mean, yeah, and here there's no, but it's in other photos. Why is the plug there on the other photos and not on this one? You will not learn it from this book. So, you know, if you're at a swap meet and somebody has this for $5, sure, pick it up. It can be useful. I don't know that I would pay that much for it. Okay, this is Mack Van Pelt's Ins and Outs of Early Ford Transmissions. This is a very niche topic because this doesn't even cover Model A transmissions. This covers V8 transmissions. But if you are if you're thinking about doing a V8 transmission conversion, this is definitely a book that you're going to need. So it just goes through all the different, you know, all the variations of the mid to late 30s transmissions, and, you know, says how to disassemble, clean, and restore them. Has a lot of different information on them, and then he's got a lot of details about all the different parts. And this is where, I mean, this is one of the things that's super useful for us, because there's like there's so much variation in parts. And if you're buying, you know, a late 30s transmission that's been in some guy's garage, you don't know like exactly what year it's from or exactly what combination of gears it has, and you're going to need this to work out exactly what you have bought, right? And what combination of gears and speeds you have. And so just for that alone, it's super useful. Trying to figure out what's going to work with what. So that this is a very useful book if you are going to do that kind of transmission conversion. You're going to need the Kling's adapter, which Kling's doesn't sell anymore. Bert sells it, but anyway. Very useful book for a very niche operation. And then this is a book, I mean, this doesn't actually exist as a book. This is a book that I had made. I think I had this made at Staples, but this is this is from Tom Endy, the great Tom Endy. So this is a file that he put up online for free. This is his transmission overhaul pictorial. And, you know, some of Tom Endy's work is so long. Like, I mean, look how long this is. This is like, it's a 40, I think it's like 40 pages. But it's such an in-depth pictorial, and it tells you exactly how to overhaul a Model A transmission. And so when I was going through it, I was like, this is totally useless as a computer PDF file. Like, I need this as a book. And so I just went to Staples and, you know, gave them the file and had them turn this into a spiral bound book. And I had like color on the first page and then black and white for all the other pages. But I recommend this if you're going to do something like one of these transmission overhauls. Like, don't try to do this off the PDF. Just have them print this out as a book. It didn't cost, I think it only cost like $20. And it is super useful, right? You can just step through page by page, and it's got, you know, the pictures will be very large, and you're not running back and forth to the computer trying to figure out like what he means and how you do it. You can make little notes, right? Like you can write on here. But this is a great book. So if you are going to do a transmission overhaul, I highly recommend Transmission Overhaul Pictorial, August 2018. He has a lot of different articles he's done about transmissions, but this is his most comprehensive. The next part of your library that I want to talk about is the club magazines. This is something everybody kind of asks about, and you often see people posting, hey, I've got, 30 years worth or 40 years worth of club magazines I'm trying to sell. Does anybody want them? And to the extent that these magazines are useful, what they're useful for is the technical articles that are in them. And fortunately, both of the clubs collect these articles in these anthologies. So on the left here, we've got Technically Speaking, which is the technical anthology from the Mark, the Model A Restorers Club, from their publication Model A News. And then here in the middle we've got How to Restore Your Model A, which is the technical anthology from MAFCA, from their magazine The Restorer. So both of these have gone through multiple volumes, and I've got for the Restorer, I've got in paper form, I've got numbers 1 and 2, and then for Technically Speaking, I've got in paper all the way up through, I guess up through 14. I think 14 came out, yeah, 14 came out in 2020. So I've got up through about 5 years ago. And in terms of whether these are useful in your library, it gets kind of complicated. So just bear with me. We have to get into the weeds a little bit. So Model A News, they do not make this available digitally. You have to buy the books if you want the back issues of this, because my intended audience here for these videos is somebody who's just getting into this. I'm assuming you don't have, 50 years of Model A News sitting around. You're going to have to backfill this. And so if you have to backfill this, you're going to have to buy these anthologies. Are they worth buying? They are worth buying when they go on sale. So the last few years, the Mark has done a once a year Black Friday sale where they will sell you this complete set for, I forget what it is exactly. It's like 40 or 50 bucks. You can get the entire set, which makes it, I think, a pretty good deal. Otherwise, I don't think it's a good deal. And the other problem with it is it's sort of a problem of volume. Like, okay, now that you've bought all these books, like, how do you find anything in them? Each of the books comes with a table of contents, right? Which is it's a little bit hard to read, right? Because it starts with like, what's the column that it was in. So these columns have these quirky names: Clutch Chatter, Authentically Speaking, Tip. That's the original column it appeared in, and then here's the name of the article, and then here's the author. And so if you are trying to find, like, I'm assuming that you've got a particular problem you're trying to troubleshoot, and then you're like, okay, I need to find some technical article that deals with this problem. And so if that's the way you're coming at this, just looking through these is going to be difficult. I don't know if they improved this at all by the time they got to volume 14. Let's see. Yeah, I guess they kind of did. At least they don't put the name of the column first anymore. So, but it is still difficult. So what I would recommend, once you have bought these, is that you can go to the Mark website, and there they have an index. It's a PDF index. You can download the index. Unfortunately, it only goes up through volume 13, I believe, at the time of this video. It only goes up through volume 13. But you can then search the index for keywords that are useful to you. You can find the article you want. You can then find the correct volume and page, and then you find the article. And then I guess you can also look at, you can look at this extra one. And I think they're now on to volume 15. They've published volume 15, but as of this writing, it wasn't, I hadn't gotten it. So that's Technically Speaking. Then for How to Restore Your Model A, so Technically Speaking, they've got 15 volumes published. How to Restore Your Model A, as of this writing, they have 11 volumes published. I happen to have the first 2 volumes because I got them out of an estate. And they're kind of cool, actually, just as historical documents. I mean, these go back, This is published in 1967. This is some very early work, and it's kind of fun looking at like just what people were dealing with as far as the problems, and also just the way that they were written. Like these early pages really go through complete restoration. It's pretty fun. It's pretty fun to read, as just to get yourself back into the mindset of these early restorers and the kinds of things that they were dealing with. So it's fun to have, particularly the early editions, it's fun to read through them. But you can also get the Restorer on USB drive. So this is the first 50 years of the Restorer. So this covers up through 2006. Now, I do not know how this maps to How to Restore Your Model A in terms of the volumes. So I don't know exactly where this cuts off. But it's certainly quite a lot. And it's a similar thing where you can, what you can do is you buy this, which costs a lot less than buying all of these volumes. And then you can go to Mathka's website. They've got an index. It's actually a pretty nice index, and it goes all the way up through May of this year. And then you, again, download it, search for terms you want in the index, and either you will find the article you want, and it will be somewhere on this disk, and you can go and get it, or it'll be after 2006, and maybe you can either buy a back issue, or you can go on a forum and be like, hey, does anybody have a copy of this, and can you send it to me or take a picture. So that's the two of these. So again, just to recap, what I would recommend if you decide you want to put in a stock of these technical articles, I would wait till the Black Friday sale to get your Technically Speaking, and then for this I would not, it's $200, I think, to buy all 11 volumes of this. I would instead buy the disc. Probably the article you want is going to be on there. And then this is article. This is a little book called Tiny Tips. I think this is Tiny Tips Volume 1. I think they now have Tiny Tips Volume 2. And this is just compilations of a column that runs in the Restorer, and it's just little tips on all different kinds of things, just little things that guys write in about. Some of it is useful, some of it is dumb. It's really kind of caveat emptor on this stuff, but a lot of it will be things that you either you may have seen this in other places, or some of this has become conventional wisdom. Just a word of note. Tiny Tips, all the stuff that's in this book also appears in these books, and it appears in the Restorer. So if you're buying these books or you're buying the disc, you're gonna get this content, but it's gonna be scattered through all of the magazine content. So if you see this at a swap meet, or you see it for sale, and it's, I don't know, under 10 bucks, it's worth picking up. It's fun. It's a fun read. You never know if you're going to find something useful in there. I've definitely found a couple of useful things. But this is, these are pretty hefty. This is a big section of your bookshelf. And are you going to actually refer to any one of these? Maybe not. But another thing that's nice about this is you can be the guy with this stuff in his library for your club. And that's always fun. To be the guy who's like, oh, that appeared in, volume 7 of Technically Speaking. Let me get you my copy of that. And, it's always fun to be that guy. The next section in my library that I want to talk about is the engine rebuilding section. And I've got 3 books here. Now, obviously, the Red Book does have a section on engine rebuilding, but as I mentioned, I feel like it kind of covers it at a fairly, not a superficial level, but it just sort of is, okay, here are the steps. Boom, 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 boom. and it doesn't go into depth at all. And so if you are going to do an engine rebuild, I think you should, and you don't, I'll say if you're going to do an engine rebuild and you don't have, somebody who's done it before that you can learn from in person, I think you do need to get some kind of specific book on it. Or what I would actually recommend is that you get all three of these, and I'll talk about why that is. But just from left to right here, we've got Rebuilding the Model A Ford Powerplant by Vic Zannis. So Vic, he lived in Alabama. He passed away in 2018. You've got the Model A Engine by the McRees. I'm not sure if they're still alive. And then you've got Four Bangers and Me by Jim Brierley. If you've been on any of the Model A forums, you've probably seen Jim. He is still alive and living in California. And so these books, kind of like I've talked about before with some of the other books, these books are each a little bit different, and they overlap. I guess I talked about that with the Parts Priceless books. These books are each a little different, and they overlap in kind of interesting ways. So, so to start with the Zannis book, I think he published this in 2014, and it's fairly text heavy. So, he goes through, here's like his disassembly section, and, you can see like kind of doing this with like a lot of pictures, like picture, 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 picture. And he doesn't do this. It's big blocks of text, and he's only giving pictures, I guess, where he thinks he needs to, of like, so here's his like stud extractor pictures. He says like how to select a machine shop, how to read a mic. And he has a section here. This is one of the things that I like here. He's got a section on kind of the modifications. Now that you've got the engine kind of broken down, he's like, here's some things you might want to think about doing, or having your machine shop do. So he talks about why you might want to cut down the bosses on the valve lifters. Here's why you might want to modify the rear main. If you do modify the rear main, here's how you would modify the crankshaft. And then this is the other this is the strength of the Zannis book. If you need like one reason to get the Zannis book, here's why. He shows you how to, if you want to go this way, he shows you how to do your own backyard kind of line boring and babbiting. So I'm not going to get into this too into detail. You'll have to buy the book, but he walks you through how to do this kind of line boring babbiting. He gives you the specs, how to, do the boring bar, how to build this machine, engine stand adapter, drive mechanism, setting and adjusting the cutting tool, hand finishing the bearings, doing this whole thing. So if you are interested in that, if you really want to get that DIY, as far as I know, this is the only book that really covers it. And then he kind of goes into, so here's how you then are going to put everything together, rebuilding the water pump. And then he's got kind of a really short section on other stuff. He's got a section on specs, tools and equipment, and then he's done. So to the extent that this book has strengths, it's in, if you're interested in doing your own line boring and babbiting, this is really the only place for that. And he talks about some of those modifications if you're interested in that. So then the next book is the McRee book. This one I think is, it's a much more kind of general interest book. I think if you wanted to do a stock rebuild and you aren't going to do your own babbiting, then probably this book will do you. And there's several things that I like about this book. It does have a lot more pictures. It you know, it starts off and it has a lot more kind of background, conceptual explanation of what's going on, how everything works. It shows you, this is really cool. It has, it shows you like the journal sizes, you know, if your crankshaft rods are, you know, you have standard crankshaft journals, and then if they're 10 under, 20 under, 30 under, 40 under, and then like what are the readings you should get from that, and same with the connecting rods. That is very useful. And they also have all of this kind of background guidance about, you know, kind of not assuming that you've done this before. Piston and bore sizes, cylinder wall thickness guidance, piston specifications, how to do like a freeze plug in the rear camshaft hole. It's very detailed. Here's all the different kinds of lifters, what you're looking for, different kinds of valve guides, the specs on the valve springs, very detailed on how to break down the engine, lots of pictures, and then it walks you step by step through putting it back together. Tells you how to check the bearings, you know, how to blue the bearings, and then check the crankshaft against the bearings and make sure that whoever did the babbiting did it correctly. And then it kind of goes on to some other stuff. It talks about like differences in the timing gear covers, rebuilding the oil pump. And another nice thing is that like it covers some of the long block stuff, right? So it's like, here's information on the oil pan, the dip tray, the dipper tray, how to get the oil pan on, the flywheel housing, how to check for cracks in the flywheel housing, how to align it, the clutch, the flywheel installation, like every single thing. The cylinder head, how to do thread repair, removing broken head studs. And then they have a whole other section on the distributor. These guys actually wrote a whole like separate book on the distributor, and I think they're just kind of cribbing from their other book, which is, you know, fine. So like you get kind of a free, like you get kind of a free short book on the distributor, which is nice. You know, it's fine. And there's an index. It's great. So like, again, if you're just doing like a stock engine, you don't have any kind of special needs, it's definitely a great book. And especially if you're not going to like try to do your own Babbitt or kind of go crazy like that. So this is like, if you're just going to get one book, this is a great book to get. And then the last book is Four Bangers and Me, Jim Brierley. And this is a really fun book, and it is heavily focused on performance modifications. So if you are just building a stock engine, you probably don't need this book. Although like it won't hurt to get this book. But he focuses a lot on, I mean, it has a lot of, it is Four Bangers and Me, right? So it tells a lot of his like personal history. But one thing that's nice about it is he like kind of mixed in through it is like all of his little tips, right? Where he's like, you know, do not use stock castellated nuts. Like I highlighted this because he's like, never, 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 never. So he has all these little tips, and he goes through all different kinds of the high compression heads, how to prepare your block. You know, he goes through like, this is, these are the nuts you should get. So he's got a chapter on modifying. If you're going to do full pressure oiling, here's what you do. If you're using a B block, if you want to use a V8 oil pump, he's got, if you're using downdraft carbs, here's what you need to do. Timing gears, all this stuff if you're modifying. So, you know, like cubic feet per minute for carbs, like here's what you need. He's like, okay, if here are the 97s, the 81s, here's what I do. It's great. If you're doing brakes. So, I think this is a really helpful, I'll look at the, yeah, so it's like building, one thing I think is nice is he's got kind of a summary chapter where he's like, okay, if you're building a mild engine, which I think a lot of guys, when you think about building a modified engine, what you're thinking of is a mild engine. So he's like, if you're building a mild engine, here's sort of the set of modifications that you should think about. Installing a PCV system. There's all kinds of stuff in here. So, and it's fun. His writing style is fun. So these books, like I said, they cover different things, right? This book is like, you know nothing, you've never done this before, you need step-by-step instructions, you're not doing anything special, here's what you need. This book is, you really want to get back to basics, you want to do your own babbiting, you want to do your own line boring, here's how you would do it, or at least here's how you get started. And then this book is, you're interested in trying to coax more performance out of your engine. So they each have kind of a different role to play, and none of them is particularly better than the others. They've each got different strengths. The next section of my library that I want to talk about is books that are probably mostly just useful for historical reference. And so the one I'm going to start with here is the service letters. So there are several volumes of service letters that you can buy. This one's the Indianapolis service letters. I think there's also the Fargo service letters, the Chicago service letters. I can't remember. And what these consist of, you can see this is actually a fairly thick book. And what these consist of is, these are the letters that went out to the dealerships in a particular part of the country during the time that the Model A was being sold. And these were kind of alerts or updates from Ford to their dealers. And it's a variety of things. It's like advice on how to sell the cars, notifications about new equipment or old equipment being obsoleted. There's a lot of times when they're complaining about, like, your mechanics or the guys in your shops are doing the following stupid thing. Will you please tell them to stop doing that? And so, again, a lot of this is not stuff that I would call, required or useful to somebody now, useful for your particular car. I can see where you might want these, for example, if you are building a fine point car and you're trying to get some kind of a variance or something, you want to do something on your car in a particular way that's not represented in the judging standards, but you think you've got evidence from the service letters that it could have looked that way from the factory based on something that appears in the letters. Maybe that's useful to you. Other than that, I don't think these are super useful, except that, you do get the odd kind of useful tidbit where you get to see how they were doing things at the time. So, so for example, here's a letter dated August 1928. In a previous section, I showed you like the tiny tips. One of the tiny tips that you see is like, oh guys, on the hubcaps, you only have to crimp over 4 of the lugs. You can save the other lugs for later. Well, if you look here, 1928, in assembling hubcap A1130 to the wheel, we crimp over 4 of the lugs on the inside of the wheel to prevent the cap from coming loose, right? So like this tip, which is sort of like, aha, I figured this out. Well, actually, like that's something you're rediscovering that Ford was doing from the beginning. So you do turn up a lot of that kind of stuff. Here's another one, like, I think it became conventional wisdom that the Model A spark plug gap setting is supposed to be 0.025, but here we are in 1928. The best results in the operation of Model A cars may be secured by setting the clearance of the gap at 0.030, right? So already you're seeing that what may have been published in the original spec and that original spec being passed down as, like the 10 Commandments, that was not being followed even by Ford, even at the time. And that's the kind of stuff that you would find in the service letters. Is like, what were they actually doing at the time as far as what was acceptable maintenance practice? So that's what these can be useful for if you're interested in that kind of thing. You do find kind of other random things. I'll show you the most fascinating thing I found in this. So here's a letter. This is an Indianapolis letter, September 1928. Assembly change in service department letter number 11. Gentlemen, blah, 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 blah. Down at the bottom. Rear axle assembly for roadsters. Roadsters are now being assembled with rear axles having an 11:39 gear ratio instead of 10:37. This gives a ratio of 3.54 to 1 instead of 3.7 as used in other models. So according to this service letter, there's some time period where the roadsters were leaving the factory with high-speed rear ends. I have never seen this referred to at any other time by anybody else. I've never seen anybody talk about having a roadster that came from the factory with 3.54 rear end. This is the only place I've ever seen this mentioned. So, you know, if that's your kind of thing, these sort of history's mysteries, perhaps you may want to pick up a copy of the service letters. All right, next book for historical interest. A lot of you have probably seen this. Somehow I got this from a library in Wales. I don't know how I got this. But it's the Victor Pagé book. So this has been published in various forms. You've probably seen this in with a blue cover, and it's called like the Ford Model A Construction Operation and Repair for the Restorer, and that's like a reprint. The way this worked is Pagé was a member of the SAE, and he wrote a ton of books about all kinds of different cars, not just the Model A. And he wrote the Model A version of it in 1928 when the car came out. He sort of had this like shtick going where when a new car came out, he would put all of this information together. He would package it up in a book and he would sell it. And then and so then as these new versions came out, he just appended more sections onto it. So there's like a Model B section, and then there's a Model V8 section, and they're just like basically stuck onto the back of the book. But one of the upshots of this is that the Model A information in this it's all based on the 1928 version of the car, and so some of it is not particularly useful. And so he, look, details of the latest models will be found at the back of this book, beginning on page 517. It's just like stapled onto the back of it. But he just goes through like very detailed descriptions of like how the cars work and, all of the mechanical details and how to maintain them and how to drive them and then how to repair them. It's got a lot of information about how you should do it. Yeah, this was interesting. This is the only place I've ever seen this particular advice, which only works on 28-29 cars, but basically it shows you that if you're gonna take the engine out on a 28-29 car, you can take the entire radiator and radiator shell and the hoses and the water outlet and inlet. You can just take the entire thing out as a single unit. You just pop it off and set it aside, and now you can get at the engine, which is really handy. This does not work on the 3031s because they changed the way the radiator shell attaches, and so it messes it up. But if you have a 28-29, you want to get to the engine, this totally works. Other than that, other than sort of this odd, little tips on getting these things apart, I don't know that this is super useful. I have not found very much of use in here, in part because he got a lot of this information from other places, right, and kind of collated it all together, and so you've probably seen this in other places. Also, in part because it's directed at guys who were making repairs in their garages, in 1928, and so a lot of it doesn't really apply. Again, useful historically, nice to see a lot of stuff together, and also useful to, if you have this historical interest in seeing, like, yeah, right, care should be taken when using shellac, white or red lead, etc. It is well to coat the threads of all bolts and screws subjected to heat, such as cylinder head nuts, with a mixture of graphite and oil. This is one of the very few places from 1928 where I have seen somebody say in writing that you should lubricate the threads of the cylinder head nuts. I have a theory that this was one of these things which everybody knew about, and it was so well known that they didn't write it down. Anyway, so he does have these odd nuggets, but I don't know if it's worth like going out and specifically trying to buy the book for it. Anyway, so that's the Victor Pagé book. The Model A instruction book. So this is the book that would have come with the Model A. It's the instruction manual, and it's fun to have. Again, do you need it? If you don't know these things, then it's certainly useful to have, right? Like the gas tank has a capacity of 10 gallons. Although I guess that depends on which version of this is. Yeah, this is the 1928 version, right? So again, you have to make sure you're getting the right version. If you have a 1930 car, this is not correct. It's an 11-gallon tank. But it's useful to have, and it tells you stuff about about shifting. Some of this is like useful to reacquaint yourself every once in a while. When the car has reached a speed of 5 miles an hour, engage second gear. Use second gear up until you're at 12 to 15 miles an hour, and then go into third gear. So that kind of stuff is useful if you have a tendency to forget and run second gear up to 20, and then you're trying to get into third and you're grinding the gears, and you're like, so it's nice to go back to this and try to remember, and then how to downshift. It's all in here. A lot of people are like, I don't know how to do this. It's like, it's all in here. But if this is something you're already pretty comfortable with, I don't know that you need to add it to your library. This kind of stuff is adequately covered in the other manuals that we have already covered in this video. But again, for historical interest, it's nice to know exactly what would have been in the instruction book that people would have gotten at the time. The last book in the historical interest section is Those Wonderful Unauthorized Accessories. This is a fun book. If you can find a copy of this, particularly the hardcover copy, it's a fun read. And what this was done by Murray Fahnestock, and he collected all these ads. And so this just talks about all of the different aftermarket parts that were available. Down at the bottom, it shows in tiny, tiny print, it shows exactly when each of these ads would have run. And so this is great if you are trying to determine whether a particular modification or accessory is period correct. That's basically what this is good for, is trying to figure out what's period correct. Yeah. And it's just fun to see like what kind of mods people were making for these cars, even at the time. They were very basic cars. There's the Winfield head. They're very basic cars, and right out of the gate, there were all kinds of performance mods that people wanted to do for them. And it's just fun. It's just fun to see them. So this is just a fun book, but again, not something that you absolutely need to have in your library. Really useful for historical reference. The final book that I want to cover in this library video is not a Model A book at all. It is the Starrett book, or Starrett, I don't know, for motor machinists and auto repairman. So this was published in 1924, and it is it's very interesting. So Starrett, of course, is well known as a machinist tool company, right? They made micrometers and all sorts of precision tools. And in the 20s and 30s, they published these books, which were trying to, I mean, it was sort of a, you know, it was a way to like market their products and help sell more products by teaching this new generation of professional skilled workers how to use their products, right? So like all these, you know, all the products that are going to be pictured are Starrett products. But what's great about this, the reason I love this book is for guys like me who don't have a machinist background, these are all the tools that you use working on Model A. And it tells you everything you need to know about how to use them. So I'm just going to flip through this. But I mean, it's how to measure a cylinder bore, right? How to use an inside mic. Like all the different kinds of files. You know, this is stuff that machinists learn. And if you're not a machinist, no one's going to teach you this. You just are sort of like, well, I don't know, isn't a file a file? No, look, here's like 8 different kinds of files, and here's what they all do, and here's how you use them. Right? And like there's a specific way that you are supposed to file things. Like here, what do you do when your file gets clogged with metal shavings? Like here's what you do it. How to use a hacksaw. There is a specific way to do it. You know, here's how to use a reamer. All this different stuff. Here's how to locate the center for drilled holes. Here's how to use a drill press. Here's how to use a tap. Here's how to use a die and take care of it. Here's everything you need to know about threads. Here's how to use thickness gauges. Here's how to use telescoping gauges. Everything you need to know about cylinder grinding. Here's everything about fitting piston rings. This one was kind of cool. Talks about fitting crankshaft and connecting rod bearings. This was kind of interesting. Hand lapping tools for crank pins. Bearing scrapers. I mean, I'm actually thinking about like, you know, doing some bearing scraping. Scraping in bearings is slow and tedious work and requires considerable patience and care. Maybe I shouldn't. I don't know. But if I needed to, like, here it is. It's a whole thing. This is like, look, it shows you how. This kind of looks like a Model A engine almost. It's probably a Model T engine. It's how to do the burning in of the bearings. Valve fitting. Like it is specifically about how you do all this stuff specifically related to cars. How to use a lathe. It's about how to use all these tools that you're going to have, but specifically how to use them with relation to cars. And I think that's so cool. Wire and sheet metal gauges. Maximum power required to drive machine tools. How to tell carburetor sizes. Installing flywheel ring gears. It's so cool. I love this book. Anyway. Starrett book for motor machinists. Such a fun book.